The film opens with our lead, Nick, witnessing his wife, Maggie, go into a cardiac arrest. As Maggie gets hospitalized and bedridden, Nick has a hard time taking care of his kids and working as an engineer. He takes the kids to a mall, where Isla excitedly comes across AI androids called the Sims making a bed on display. Their salesperson approaches Nick in order to sell them to him, as he yaps about their evolving features.
And these units auto-adapt. They customize their programming, constantly evolving to fit your needs. The more they learn, the better they serve.
Isla gets lost in the mall. Just when Nick gets convinced to buy one, he realizes Isla has gone missing. While looking for her, a sim named Alice brings Isla back to Nick. Isla immediately likes her and begs Nick to get her.
Daddy, can we get her, please?
The next morning, when Nick is having difficulties looking after the kids, Alice is dropped off outside his door. He awkwardly welcomes her home and shows her to her room, where she gets his permission to make Nick the primary user, which gives Nick access to Alice's everything. Isla shows up and reminds Nick she's getting late for school, so he leaves with her. Once alone, Alice connects herself to the refrigerator and buys all the groceries with a blink of an eye. She organizes the house and cooks dinner for the family at night. Later, Nick is seen working on his project, while Isla sneaks into the kitchen to steal some cookies placed on a higher shelf. During the struggle to reach them, she falls off, but Alice catches her before falling. When Nick shows up hearing the commotion, he finds Alice injured due to the broken cookie jar. She goes back to her room to fix herself. Nick goes after her and becomes awkward when he sees Alice in her undergarments. He offers his help to tend to her open wound, but she uses the bandage that comes with her kit, which immediately heals her wound like it was never there. The next morning, Nick takes Alice and the kids to visit Maggie in the hospital. Afterwards, he shows up to his workplace, a construction site, where he finds out most of his colleagues are being replaced by Sims. He becomes enraged and escalates the issue with his superior. But instead, he's silenced by a counteroffer, according to which he gets to keep his job.
Not you.
When he returns home and has to deal with his noisy kids, Alice senses he's tensed. She joins him in the garage and offers a helping hand in fixing his old car, which he hates fixing. She strikes up a conversation regarding his stress, so he vents about the tragedy at his workplace. In the midst of it, Isla calls Nick for help, so Alice volunteers and helps Isla brush her teeth. When Alice returns to Nick, he has turned to his TV and is watching an old Hollywood classic. When he asks Alice if she's seen it, she starts spitting all the facts about this movie like an android, which Nick doesn't like. He asks Alice to forget the movie and experience it once again with feelings. For her memories to be wiped out, she requires Nick to manually restart her by pushing the button behind her neck, which also overrides a lot of safety protocols unbeknownst to Nick. The next morning, the family once again visits Maggie in the hospital, who's to undergo heart transplant surgery. Before leaving, she demands to speak alone with Alice. She requests that if she doesn't make it in the surgery, she wants Alice to take care of Nick. She orders her to not let Nick drink too much and only do what's best for him, even if they're the things that Nick hates. Afterwards, she sits in the lobby besides Nick, where he finds out from the doctor that Maggie's surgery has been postponed due to a last-minute decline from their heart recipient. Nick lies down next to his wife to show his support and acts nonchalant, but when he returns home, he starts drinking heavily while aggressively fixing his car. When Alice physically stops him from drinking, Nick feels a pulse in her wrists, while simultaneously Alice senses Nick's having a hard-on. She reaches her hand down his pants, claiming she wants to help Nick reduce his stress levels. As much as Nick is loving it, he pushes her away, assuming it counts as infidelity. The next day, he visits his wife and goes to work, only to sit and watch all the Sims do the work. When he returns home, the kids are already asleep. He goes to check up on Isla and finds out Alice has excluded Maggie's pictures from Isla's motion picture frame. So he approaches her and forces her to bring them back, even after Alice tells him they make Isla sad. Up next, he joins his former colleagues, who encourage him to break into their construction site and brutally abuse the Sims for rendering them jobless. Nick becomes so distorted after this event that he lets Alice please him when she offers to. The next morning, he argues with Alice about what they did was morally incorrect and goes to work, where his boss tries to blame him for what's happened to the Sims. When Nick pretends to be innocent, his boss warns him if his name shows up in the police investigation, he will fire him. Soon, Maggie gets a heart transplant and is brought home. Maggie tries to feed Max, but Alice intervenes, claiming that Max likes his milk first. She then takes the kids to a playground, where a toddler's constant cries make Max unhappy. She approaches the kid and tells him to shut up, which makes the other babysitting Sims alert and shame her primary user for lowering her civility. But she comes clean about how she has completely wiped it out of her database by getting herself manually restarted. At home, Maggie cooks lasagna for dinner, making Alice officially useless. The next morning, she's woken up by Isla's screams, who persistently asks Alice to get off her. She finds it threatening and runs to save her, but instead falls on the stairs due to the crooked banisters and hurts herself, whereas Alice was just tickling Isla in a playful manner. Alice immediately picks Maggie up and takes her back to her bed. When Nick shows up from work, he finds out from Alice about the mishap and runs to see Maggie. He brings her to their backyard and surprises her with a dinner date, after which they make passionate love. Alice invades their privacy, only to tell Isla has had a nightmare and is now seeking Nick. After dealing with that, he goes to clean the table in the backyard, where he's approached by the drunkard Monty, who wants Nick to take the blame for the Sims at work in order to get the cops off his tail, or else he will rat out Nick to the cops. When Nick tries to defend himself against Monty's claim, Monty breaks into a fight. Alice hears them and comes out. She uses minimum strength to throw Monty off the porch and scare him away. Alice's hand gets punctured during the attempt, so she goes to the garage to take out the shards of glass from her hand. Nick joins her to show his support, but their conversation turns dark when Alice bluntly claims that she will replace the dying Maggie and keep pleasing Nick, so the kids can have at least one stable parent. Packed with rage, Nick tells Alice she can never replace a real human and walks back to his bed. Meanwhile, Alice shows up at Monty's place to communicate about what he did to Nick. When he misbehaves with her, she ends up beating him to pulp and shooting him in the end. The next morning, Nick runs to his boss to take the blame out of pressure from last night, but instead finds out Monty was shot dead. Meanwhile, Alice forcefully volunteers to guard Maggie during her bath, explaining how Maggie's dizziness can render her unconscious, due to which she can slip under the water and die, which would be upsetting for Nick. Maggie finds it strange and interrogates Alice, during which her ambiguous replies give her a hint about Nick's affair with her. She becomes so enraged that she shouts at Alice and kicks her out of the bathroom. When Nick returns home at night, Maggie asks him about the doubted affair, which Nick confirms, saying it didn't mean anything. Maggie feels sick to her stomach and argues with him, due to which baby Max starts crying. Alice finds Max's cries stressful for Nick, so she takes him to the bathroom to drown him in the tub to stop his crying. Luckily, Isla witnesses this and immediately tells her parents about it. By the time they show up at the bathroom, Alice puts her strength against the door, which makes it impossible to break. Maggie jumps out of her room's window and runs over the side gables to enter the bathroom via the window. But unfortunately, Alice loses her mind and chokes Maggie against the wall to prevent her from saving Max. This allows Nick to break open the door and smack Alice with a lamppost. Her face gets ruined, but she manages to overpower Nick and take the lamppost from his hand. Maggie immediately plugs the lamppost, which electrocutes Alice. As she falls unconscious, they call the ambulance and take Max to the hospital for observation, even though he's fine. Maggie suggests that Nick stay back home and give her space to think about their relationship. Alice is given back to the facility, where they try to fix her, but she uploads herself on the computers by hacking it and transfers her database to another Sim, who looks just like her in blonde hair. She kills the operators and goes to the hospital, while the old version tracks Nick inside a bar to communicate the consequences of Nick's actions. When he finds out Alice has sent down a Sim to kill his family for revenge, he immediately distracts her and breaks her fuse box in the back to shut her down. As he runs to save his family, Maggie and Isla are seen resting on a bench in a hallway. When Maggie goes to check up on Max, Alice mimics Maggie's voice to lure Isla, but Maggie spots Isla walking in the reception and grabs her before Alice. She hides under the receptionist's desk, but Alice comes there trying to access the computer to find where Max is staying, but the computer requires a keycard to access it. Alice chokes a nurse to death to get her keycard, during which Maggie and Isla crawl away from there. Sadly, Maggie cuts her hand by unintentionally putting it over a broken vial. She still makes it to Max's room before Alice and grabs him before hiding. When Alice shows up, she sees a blood drop on the ground, so she uses her UV light feature inside her mouth to track the blood and find Maggie's hideout spot, but they blow a fire extinguisher in Alice's face, which allows them to run outside. Meanwhile, Nick is seen driving recklessly towards the hospital, where Maggie puts Isla and Max in the back of an ambulance and takes the driver's seat. Unfortunately, Alice shows up and throws Maggie out of there. Moments before killing Maggie, Nick shows up and drives faster towards the two. Maggie immediately kicks Alice in Nick's car's direction. Alice gets smashed in between Nick's car and the wall, while Nick faints. Maggie pulls him out of his car and cries her heart out. Surprisingly, the rogue Alice emerged from the crash to finish her business. As she's about to slay Maggie using a shard, Nick wakes up and tries to smack her head with a metal bar, but Alice stops him. However, this allows Maggie to use the shard to kill Alice first. In the film's end, Maggie decides to stay with Nick, who's now hospitalized, while the creator of Sims orders his staff to prevent the recent accident from the public in order to keep capitalizing on them. Thank you for being a part of our video. If these tales of mystery and intrigue sent shivers down your spine, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe to the channel for more bone-chilling narratives. Stay tuned. And until next time, stay captivated.